Welcome to the Work Trends Podcast, brought to you by Talent Culture. I'm your host, Megan M. Bureau. Every week, I interview smart people reimagining the world of work. Be sure to stay current with all of our interesting podcasts by visiting our page at Talent Culture Work Trends on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And of course, you can listen at talentculture.com on the podcast page. Hello and welcome to the Talent Culture Work Trends Podcast, sponsored by Poster Guard Plus. I'm your host, Megan M. Bureau. In this episode, we'll explore how compliance looks differently in today's remote world. With over 20 million people in the U.S. working from home, leaders need to know the facts to effectively ensure compliance across dispersed workforces. But before we begin today's podcast, please ask yourself these two questions. Number one, are you in a position that oversees or needs to understand compliance? Number two, how confident are you that your company is fully compliant when it comes to managing remote employees? We are thrilled to be joined by Jamie Lizotte, Director of HR and Tax Products at ComplyRight, which provides cutting-edge compliance products and programs for businesses. She is extremely passionate about HR and developing products to assist businesses with easing the process of compliance as well as overall product management. Welcome back to the podcast, Jamie. It's so great to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much, Megan, and it's a pleasure to be back.
I must know, though, where are you located today?
I am in sunny but rather steamy South Florida.
Ooh, I love that. That works. How about that?
It does, we're getting ready to head into the fall season, which is my favorite, even though we do not have the colorful fall like you do up in New England, but it's starting to hopefully cool off. So getting ready to head into the best part of the year down here.
Hey, hold everything. If you're there in the podcast audience of Work Trends, you may have heard the news. I live in Portland, Oregon now. I'm in Portlandia in the Pacific Northwest, but you know what? That's how far back I go with ComplyRight. For everybody out there, they are my BFFs. And so they've seen me through my career through the years, and that's exciting to know. So anyways, love fall too, because I'm a fall baby, right?
Exactly. Me too. Yep.
You are?
That's where I was raised, up in New England. So that is my absolute favorite season.
All right. Well, listen, let's dive right into this. Let's revisit the definition of exempt and non-exempt workers. Can you please explain how to differentiate them?
Absolutely. And the main difference really between exempt and non-exempt workers truly comes down to overtime pay under the Fair Labor Standards Act, or also, we love acronyms, also called FLSA. And non-exempt employees, to start, they are entitled to at least the minimum wage, and they must be paid overtime. And usually when it comes to overtime, that's time and a half, and that's for any hours that are worked over 40 hours in a work week. Now, on the other hand, exempt employees, they do not get overtime pay, and they're typically paid a salary, and that would actually cover all the hours that they work that week. And that is regardless if they work over 40 hours. Now, I do want to mention, though, that it's not just about salary when it comes to exempt. And in order to qualify as exempt, employees have to meet a minimum salary threshold and also pass a specific job duties test under the FLSA. And these exemptions, they're generally categorized by the type of work that they do in their role. And that could include things like executives, administrators, learned professionals, for instance, would be considered doctors or lawyers, creative professionals, and then even computer-related professionals. So you're talking more in the IT area now. And there are others like outside sales or even highly compensated employees. So ultimately, to kind of wrap everything up, it really does boil down to how much they're paid, also how they're paid, and what type of work that they do in their role.
Okay, so let's get right down to it. What basics should every leader know about time and pay for non-exempt employees? Because it's a little different.
Absolutely. There are a few non-negotiable leaders that you need to keep in mind when you're categorizing your employees. And a few bullets I want to go over is all time worked must be tracked accurately, and that does include breaks, overtime, and even brief tasks that are done, like checking emails after hours. Another area is non-exempt employees must be paid for every hour worked. And then overtime must be paid according to federal and state laws. Now, off the clock work, even if it seems voluntary, is not allowed. So you have to make sure that, like I said before at the beginning, every hour has to be paid for. And then timekeeping systems, they need to be easy to access and reliable, especially when it comes to remote staff, because we know that's a big part of our workforce nowadays.
Oh my gosh, totally, right?
Exactly. And isolation from lack of social connection. And then finally, state laws can vary. So leaders really want to stay up to date and current on both their federal and local regulations to make sure that they are always in compliance.
Well, this is exactly why you're here today. You just uncovered some important rules that may or may not be well known, but should be. And I can only imagine that we've got a few listeners out there who's going to be double checking into their processes. So thank you for that. All right, moving on. So what should be considered when managing remote non-exempt workers?
So managing non-exempt workers remotely, it does bring unique challenges. And I'm going to share a few things about what matters most when it comes to them. And the first thing I want to start with is to set clear expectations around work hours, around the availability that they need to have, and required breaks. These boundaries help prevent the untracked work. And, it definitely having these expectations up front eliminate the worry of having to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. Because again, you don't see them. They're working remotely. It's kind of an honor system. And you want to make sure that they're honoring those boundaries that you're setting for them. Another thing is using time tracking tools that are remote friendly and easy to use. So like I mentioned previously, you want to make sure that they're reliable and they're easy for those remote workers to access. Another thing is educating both your managers and your employees on what qualifies as work, right? So like answering a quick message after hours, making sure that time is being captured and paid. So when it comes to non-exempt workers, every piece of work that they do needs to be paid. So there has to be some clear set boundaries on letting them know that when they sign out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they can't come back at 7 o'clock and answer an email, or that time has to be tracked if approved. Very easy when you're working in the house to leave the office door open and then say, oh, there's a ding for an email, let me go answer it. But again, it just kind of brings us full circle back to those clear expectations and those boundaries you want to have set for those remote workers. And lastly, I'd like to just wrap it up with making sure that managers have regular check-ins to monitor the work that they have, the workload, and then also make sure that they're preventing burnout. Like I mentioned, it's very easy to overwork when you're at home. Hey, I have a few minutes here, there. Sometimes you don't even realize it's 5 o'clock and you're ready to shut off for the day, and now you've worked 10 or 12 hours. So we want to make sure that we're checking in on our employees that are working remotely to make sure that they still have that work-life balance in their lives.
Talk to us about the pitfalls to avoid when managing exempt employees.
Even though exempt employees aren't eligible for overtime, there are definitely still some risks you want to be aware of. And the first one is misclassification, which is actually a really big one. Just calling someone salaried, saying that they're exempt, doesn't automatically make them exempt, because like I mentioned right at the beginning, there is a job duties test that must legally qualify them as an exempt worker. So it has to do with the roles and their responsibilities in their role. Another risk area is avoiding deducting pay for partial day absences unless your policy aligns with legal guidelines. Now, doing this incorrectly can actually jeopardize their exempt status. So very important to make sure that you're not doing that. And then lastly is respecting workplace culture. Exempt doesn't mean that you're always available. So really avoid setting a precedent for 60-hour work weeks. It's very easy to fall into the rhythm of just saying getting everything done, and now your regular 40-hour work week, because you're exempt, exceeds consistently. And obviously the managers checking on those employees is very very important because you don't want them to burn out. You want them to also have a healthy work-life balance.
Yeah, this is definitely not an easy task, yet we all know it's important to us as leaders and employees and whatever you classify yourself as at work. Let's talk about well-being, because I think, and everybody who tunes into me regularly knows this, that remote work poses some risk when it comes to employee well-being. Can you please expand on what we're seeing and how to best support employees right now?
Most definitely. And well-being is one of our popular terms we hear very often in the workplace compared to probably 15, 20 years ago, right? And it definitely is very important. Like I've mentioned a few times before in our past questions, remote work can definitely blur the lines between work and personal life. So some common challenges that come with remote work and well-being is, you've heard me talk about it again. I hate to repeat myself, but it's burnout from overworking. It's so easy to just quickly say, oh, let me jump here for 5 minutes and do it. And then you look at the clock and you've actually worked another 2 hours. To not get up from your desk during the day to take a break, making sure that you're actually stepping away. Isolation from lack of social connection is another area of concern, because you're not actually interacting with people face to face with that physical contact, what we call back in the day of having those water cooler connections, just getting up from your office to go talk to somebody and say, hey, how was your weekend? Even though we still have the means of Teams and chat functions and talking with our employees, it is so business focused now because we're working from home and it's just like get in, get your work done and get out, that we lose the connection of that personal connection and building the relationships within our office space like we used to have. But it also leads to the last bullet point that I have here on this part is feeling undervalued and overlooked. You're not seeing your boss or others encouraging as often, checking in as often, just, having those check-ins. And I really encourage people to, leaders to make sure that they're checking on their employees. And not just about their work, but just about their personal. How are you doing? Not how is work going, but how are you doing? A very important question.
Are you kidding me? That's the most important question, I think, in the world of work today, actually. I'm going to go out on a limb. If you agree with me out there in the community, let me know if you can disagree with me and why. I have a burning question that just came up, and we must talk about this because time is flying today. What does a hostile work environment or work culture look like right now in a remote workforce, and how can it be properly managed?
Hostile environments are not limited to physical offices. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't even think about. They don't consider. Hostile environments can show up as inappropriate messages or comments in chats or video calls. Even calls like, podcasts, comments or anything like that. Exclusion from meetings, projects, or even communication loops. Bullying or passive aggressive behavior through digital tools. You're talking email, where you can see that obviously when you're in the physical office space, but it just actually enhances the opportunity for that to happen in email now, because that's what you're doing. Because I know as soon as we stepped out into the remote work world, my emails went from probably 50 a day to 500. So there's a lot more opportunity there. And then micromanagement of unrealistic expectations that create undue stress. That's an area that we don't look at things. We always think of it as being someone picking on somebody else, but in you creating that undue stress for the workforce, saying, oh, well, they actually get more work done when they're working at home, doesn't mean that you can actually pile on more to create that undue stress. But there are ways to manage this. And that comes with enforcing a zero tolerance policy on harassment. And obviously talking about these types of harassment so that your employees are aware of them and the different platforms that they can happen on, so that zero tolerance policy is no matter the platform or the setting that they're in. Definitely set expectations for professional behavior in all digital communications. Make reporting channels clear, safe, and obviously accessible to your remote employees. And train your managers to spot signs of misconduct in virtual interactions. And then the last thing I want to share here is just make sure, and this is even if you're on site, whatever, but my 3 words are document, document, document. And then you have to investigate issues thoroughly, even in remote environments.
Well, I sure appreciate your insights, and we definitely cannot gloss over topics like this. And you're right, it takes on a whole different life in a remote workforce. Last but not least, question here: what are the best ways to educate and inform employees about rules, regulations, and rights?
Well, keeping employees informed is definitely an ongoing effort. It is a job in itself, but I will share some best practices. You want to start with a solid employee handbook. So you heard me a couple times today talk about setting up policies, having clear expectations. That's going to happen in your policy handbook. And this should be the go-to guide for everything from your PTO policies to your workplace safety and even the zero tolerance harassment policy we just talked about. You want to keep the language in your policies simple, skip the jargon, and make sure that it's organized so people can actually find what they're looking for when they need it. Make onboarding matter for your new employees that are coming in. And I know that definitely changes, especially when you're onboarding remote employees, but they are just important as the employees that you're bringing on that are on site. And a strong onboarding experience really sets the tone for them. So make it informative, make it engaging, and make it interactive rather than just checking off boxes for them. Use interactive training, especially on important topics when it comes to like harassment and safety. Another area is considering micro-learning. These short, digestible modules that can be delivered via email, chat tools, or even your LMS system that you have built in. But those are really ways to hone in on them, making sure that they understand what they're learning and really remembering it versus giving them a 2-hour program that they're absolutely not going to remember. You also want to encourage an environment where employees feel comfortable asking questions by making your HR and the compliance teams approachable and accessible. Make sure that they know that you have an open door policy. And even when I say open door policy to my remote workers, that means you can hit me up on chat anytime. And if I'm not available, I'll definitely get to you as soon as I am. But that open door policy is whether I'm in the office or whether I'm working from home. Also, make sure that you maintain a central hub or an intranet where all your employees can easily access those up-to-date policies. And anytime that there are changes, make sure you're sending out notifications to them so that they can go back and take a look at what's changed. And lastly, I want to say, don't just set it and forget it. You want to make sure that you refresh your training regularly and that you stay compliant with any required updates so that your employees are aware.
Well, communication is always at the heart of everything, isn't it? But
it is.
Right? But knowing what works, how to reach your audiences, ensuring leaders and employees are on the same page. These are not always easy challenges, but we are grateful for your expertise on managing this part of our business culture. So thank you so much for stopping by.
It was great being here again and talking to you, Megan.
Wow, we covered a lot today, Jamie. Thank you so much for your insights on a topic that I know is so important to our community and could prevent costly mistakes. Here are a few of my key takeaways. Number 1, what feels like basic compliance to some can be completely new for first-time leaders and managers of restructured remote teams. It's always okay to revisit the fundamentals. Number 2, health and well-being are at the heart of many of the rules and regulations discussed today, which can humanize compliance in a way that resonates with leaders. This is so exciting to me. And number 3, don't be fearful, but know the rules and communicate them effectively with your employees. Find partners who can help make it simple and effective. Jamie, thanks again for being here. You are always a wealth of knowledge. And certainly last but not least, you, the talent culture community, I want to hear from you. Be sure to use the hashtag #WorkTrends and share your thoughts on the following questions. Number 1, what compliance pitfalls jumped out at you in today's conversation? Number 2, how do you manage breaks and off-the-clock time for your employees. Number 3, what are some creative ways to foster well-being among your remote teams? Visit us on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, share your responses to these questions, or feel free to contact me personally at Megan M. Bureau on the socials or mbureau@talentculture.com. Thanks so much for listening to the Work Trends Podcast, the place to find meaningful connections at work. If you love what we do here, make sure to share us with your friends, your colleagues. Send us a question. We got your back. See you soon. Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just a reminder that you can hear all the Work Trends podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and on the podcast page at talentculture.com. Be sure to subscribe so you can listen on the go and stay up to date on all the latest news you want to hear. I look forward to catching up with you next time. I hope today's information made you wiser, happier, more informed, and most importantly, thinking of how you can use it to improve the quality of your life.